Hi, everybody. It's Monday morning, and we're going to do kind of a part two on what we talked about last week. We talked about thinking. And one of the things that we see in the New Testament is the Apostle Paul tells us that really the first step to thinking clearly is really thinking humbly. And sometimes if we don't think humbly, we will never think clearly. Now, Paul tells us that principle really in Romans 12:3. And one of the things that we read there, Paul says, "For by the grace given me," notice that he's humbly speaking of the grace that has been given to him. And he says, "I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the measure of faith God has given you." Now, he mentions twice in there that it's all about what God has given to us. So really, clear thinking, as I said, begins with humble thinking. You know, it's interesting that modern philosophers and scholars have talked about an effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And in that description of how that works within us, it tells us that most of us don't recognize our own inabilities. And because we refuse to accept our inabilities, we never really discover our capabilities. Now, the study that was involved in that showed that most of us just fail to accurately assess our own skills. We think we're a lot better than we are. We think we're more talented than we are. And it kind of gets in the way of just thinking clearly about ourselves and then thinking about other things as well. So if we think we're much better at something than we really are, we're probably blocking some serious thought. So Paul says, first of all, that we have to overcome our own personal bias, that kind of we tell ourselves, there isn't much I need to learn. I know it all. And when we do that, we really stop thinking and we stop learning. In fact, we might say it this way. If you're a know-it-all, you will never know at all. Even when we come to Christ at our conversion, you know, the Christian conversion begins with a recognition of our inability to save ourselves from the power of sin. And so the very first act of faith is really this act of humility. When we come to Christ, then, we humbly recognize our need, we confess that need, and then we get to the positive of coming to Christ. Now, that same thing can happen in our thinking. If we don't first experience humility, we will never come to the clear thinking that we desire. If we can't see our sin, we cannot see the need for our Savior. If we think we know it all, we will never seek any further knowledge. So here's an exercise in thinking that I want you to try out today. Somewhere in your busy schedule and in the midst of a conversation and talking about life, try out these three little words, okay? And they may even be painful to say, but these three little words are simply, I don't know. Because you will never know what you know until you first know what you don't know. So practice a little humility today and admit that you don't quite know everything. Neither do I, but we're all on the way toward a discovery of truth. Have a good day. Have a great Monday. Bye for now. God bless.